My name is Evelyn Hartwell, and I'm 73 years old. For most people, that means invisible, forgettable, someone whose opinion doesn't matter and whose presence barely registers. But sometimes being underestimated is the greatest weapon you can have. 3 months ago, I discovered that my own daughter-in-law and her sister had been laughing at me behind my back for years, not just gentle teasing, cruel. Cutting mockery about my thrift store wardrobe and embarrassing appearance. They called me Goodwill Granny when they thought I couldn't hear. What they didn't know was that I had been living modestly by choice. Sitting on a fortune in designer pieces that would make their heads spin before I tell you exactly how I made them pay for their cruelty. I want you to know this story has twists that will leave you speechless if you've ever been underestimated because of your age or appearance. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what I did next will show you that wisdom and patience can be the sweetest revenge of all. And if you've faced similar treatment from family members, share your story in the comments below. We feature real stories from our community, and yours might be next. Now, let me take you back to where this all began, in the elegant suburbs of Beacon Hill, Massachusetts. It was my late husband Charles's birthday, what would have been his 75th. I had invited the family to our Beacon Hill townhouse for a memorial dinner. Charles had been gone for 2 years, but I still felt his presence in every corner of our home. Especially in his study where his collection of rare books lined mahogany shelves. I had spent the morning cooking his favorite meal, beef Wellington, roasted vegetables, and his mother's apple tart recipe. I wore my usual attire. A simple navy cardigan I'd owned for 15 years, comfortable wool slacks, and my sensible walking shoes. To anyone looking, I appeared to be exactly what I was, a widow living quietly on her pension. My son Marcus arrived first with his wife, Candace, and their twin daughters, Isabella and Sophia, both 22 and fresh out of college. Candace swept into the house wearing a designer coat I recognized immediately, Burberry. Probably $1,500. Her sister, Delphine, followed behind in head-to-toe Louis Vuitton. "Oh, Evelyn," Candace said, air-kissing me while her eyes scanned my outfit with barely concealed disdain. "You're looking comfortable," Delphine snickered. "That cardigan is so vintage, it's almost fashionable again." The twins exchanged glances and smiled in that way young people do when they think they're being subtle. I had raised 3 children and 6 grandchildren. I knew every expression in the book. During dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to fashion and shopping. Candace and Delphine regaled the table with stories of their recent shopping trip to Newbury Street. Dropping brand names like breadcrumbs, we saw the most gorgeous Hermes scarf. Delphine gushed, $1,500, but absolutely worth it for special occasions. "I've been dying for a vintage Chanel bag," Candace added. "The real ones from the 80s and 90s are so hard to find now. They're like collector's items." I quietly served dessert, listening as they discussed their wish lists. Vintage Versace, classic Dior, originally Saint Laurent pieces. Items that, unbeknownst to them, were hanging in my cedar closet upstairs, many still with tags attached. After dinner, as I was clearing plates, I overheard Candace whispering to Delphine in the kitchen, "Did you see that awful sweater she's wearing?" Candace hissed, "It's got pills all over it. I'm embarrassed to be seen with her in public. At least she stays home most of the time," Delphine replied. "Can you imagine if she showed up to Isabella's graduation looking like that? I'd die of shame." My hands trembled slightly as I set down the plates, but I kept my expression neutral. 45 years of marriage to a diplomat had taught me to control my reactions. Charles always said, "Evelyn, the person who shows their hand first usually loses the game." That night, after everyone left, I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, a space the family rarely visited. I unlocked a cedar closet that contained 30 years of careful collecting. Charles had encouraged my passion for vintage designer pieces, often bringing me treasures from his travels or surprising me with auction finds. Inside hung over 200 items, original Chanel suits from the 1960s, Hermes scarves in pristine condition, vintage Versace gowns, Saint Laurent blazers, Christian Dior coats, and handbags worth more than most people's cars. The collection was worth easily $500,000, possibly more. I had stopped wearing these pieces years ago, partly because they felt too precious for everyday life, and partly because I'd grown comfortable in simpler clothes. But as I ran my fingers over a 1987 Chanel bag that Candace would probably sell her soul for, an idea began to form. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Patricia Morse, and my longtime friend and appraiser, Margaret Chen. Patricia had handled Charles's estate, and Margaret had helped us acquire several pieces over the years. "Evelyn, darling," Margaret said when she arrived that afternoon, "what's this about? You sounded mysterious on the phone." I led them both to the cedar closet and watched their faces as I opened the doors. Patricia gasped audibly. "My God, Evelyn," she breathed, "I knew you collected. But this is museum quality." Margaret was already examining pieces with her jeweler's loupe. "This Hermes Kelly bag alone is worth $40,000, and this Chanel suit, is this from Karl Lagerfeld's first collection?" "Evelyn, where did you find this?" "Charles bought it for me in Paris in 1983. I said simply. "I wore it once, for the next 2 hours." Margaret catalogued and estimated values while Patricia took notes. The final tally was staggering, $647,000. For the conservative estimates, potentially over $1 million at auction for the rarest pieces. "What are you thinking of doing with all this?" Patricia asked. I explained what I had overheard at dinner, and both women's expressions grew serious. "They have no idea what you own?" Margaret asked. "None whatsoever. They see a dowdy old woman in thrift store clothes. They have no idea that I could buy and sell their entire wardrobes without touching my savings account." Patricia leaned forward. "What do you want to do about it?" I had been thinking about this all night. I want to teach them a lesson about judging people by appearances, but I also want to do some good. I've been thinking about establishing a scholarship fund at the local community college for older women returning to school. Charles always believed in second chances. "That's beautiful, Evelyn," Margaret said, "but how does this connect to your family situation?" I smiled. "They're going to help me decide which pieces to sell." 2 weeks later, I invited Candace and Delphine over for tea. I had spent the morning carefully selecting my outfit, my most worn cardigan complete with a small moth-hole faded jeans and canvas sneakers that had seen better days. When they arrived, both impeccably dressed as usual, I served tea in my everyday china, not the spode that Charles's mother had left me. "Girls," I said, using the term I knew annoyed them, "I need your help with something." Candace's eyebrows rose slightly. She wasn't used to me asking for anything. "I've been thinking about my financial situation," I continued, "and I realize I need to make some changes. I've been living too modestly, and it's time to sell some things and enjoy life a little more." Delphine perked up immediately. "Oh, Evelyn, that's wonderful. What kind of things?" "Well," I said, wringing my hands as if nervous, "Charles left me some old clothes and accessories. I've been keeping them in storage, but I don't think I'll ever wear them. They're probably out of style anyway." The sisters exchanged glances. I could practically see dollar signs in their eyes. "What kind of clothes?" Candace asked carefully. "Oh, designer things, Chanel, Hermes, that sort of nonsense. I never understood why Charles spent so much money on clothes I'd never wear." Delphine nearly choked on her tea. "Did you say Chanel?" "Yes, and some Versace pieces, I think, and bags. So many bags. I don't know what Charles was thinking. Who needs 20 handbags?" Candace set down her cup with trembling hands. "Evelyn, those brands. They don't go out of style, they're investment pieces. You could get good money for them, do you really think so? I asked innocently. I was thinking of just donating them to charity. There's a women's shelter downtown that might. No, Delphine interrupted, then caught herself. I mean, charity is wonderful. But you should really see what they're worth. First, we could help you sell them, would you? That's so kind of you both. Candace leaned forward. We know all the best consignment shops. We could take them off your hands and handle everything. You wouldn't have to worry about any of it. Both women looked stricken. They hadn't realized I'd overheard their cruel comments. Did you think I was family when you told everyone I was broke and couldn't afford to keep my house? When you used my supposed poverty to make yourselves look like generous saints, Patricia slid a folder across the table. These are the authentication certificates and appraisals for all the items you took from Mrs. Hartwell's home. The total value is $52,347. You sold items worth $17,200 and kept $10,320 for yourselves, giving Mrs. Hartwell only $6,880. The remaining items, worth approximately $35,000, are still in your possession. Additionally, Margaret added, we have documentation of at least 6 items that you've been photographed wearing or carrying, with a combined value of over $15,000. Detective Rodriguez opened her own folder. Here's what's going to happen. You have 48 hours to return all unsold items to Mrs. Hartwell. You also need to provide full financial accounting of all sales and return the money you kept illegally. If you comply fully, Mrs. Hartwell is willing not to press criminal charges, and if we don't, Delphine whispered, then you'll be arrested for grand larceny and fraud. The detective said matter-of-factly, these are felony charges in Massachusetts, carrying potential sentences of up to 5 years in prison. Candace burst into tears. Evelyn, please, we're sorry. We never meant for it to go this far. We've been struggling financially, and when we saw those beautiful things, you thought you'd take advantage of a stupid old woman. I finished for her. No. We thought you didn't understand their value. We thought we were helping you get something for pieces you'd never use anyway. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 73 years. The tragedy, Candace, is that if you had simply been honest with me, if you had treated me with respect and kindness, I would have given you both pieces from my collection. I have more beautiful clothes upstairs than I could wear in 10 lifetimes. But your greed and your cruelty have cost you far more than money. 2 days later, Candace and Delphine returned to my house with everything they had taken, plus the money they owed me. They moved quietly, efficiently, like chastened children. Marcus came with them, his face grave with embarrassment and disappointment. Mom, he said as his wife and sister-in-law carried bags upstairs, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what they were doing. I know, sweetheart, I said, patting his arm. This isn't your fault. But it is my responsibility. Candace is my wife, and I should have seen what was happening. After they finished returning my property, I asked them all to sit in the living room Isabella and Sophia had come to, both looking mortified by their mother's and aunt's behavior. I want you all to understand something, I began. This was never about the clothes or the money. It was about respect, about treating people with dignity regardless of how they dress or how much money you think they have. I looked directly at Candace and Delphine. You saw an elderly woman in simple clothes and assumed she was stupid, poor, and easy to manipulate. You forgot that I raised 3 children, ran a household through dozens of diplomatic postings, and was married to one of the shrewdest negotiators in the State Department. For 45 years, Candace was crying again, but this time the tears seemed genuine. Evelyn, how can we make this right? You can start by never judging anyone by their appearance again, I said, and you can remember that kindness costs nothing. but its absence can cost everything. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Charles and I had planted together 20 years ago. I've decided to establish a scholarship fund for older women returning to school. It will be called the Charles Hartwell Second Chances Foundation. The money will come from selling pieces from my collection, pieces I will choose to sell, at prices I agree to, through proper channels. I turned back to face them. If you're interested in earning back my trust, you can volunteer to help with the foundation. There's a lot of work involved in setting up scholarships, interviewing candidates, and organizing fundraising events. Isabella spoke up for the first time. Grandma, I'd love to help with that. So would I, Sophia added. Even Marcus nodded. It sounds like a wonderful way to honor Dad's memory. Candace and Delphine looked at each other, then at me. We'll do whatever you want us to do, Candace said quietly. I don't want you to do it for me, I replied. I want you to do it because it's right. 3 months later, the Charles Hartwell Second Chances Foundation awarded its first scholarships to 5 women between the ages of 45 and 67 who were returning to school to change their careers or finish degrees they'd started decades earlier. The ceremony was held at the Boston Public Library, and I wore a stunning 1965 Chanel suit that I'd been saving for a special occasion. Candace and Delphine had both thrown themselves into the foundation work with surprising dedication. Perhaps facing the consequences of their actions had taught them something about empathy and humility. Or perhaps they simply realized that contributing to something meaningful was more satisfying than acquiring designer handbags. Isabella had taken a particular interest in our scholarship recipients, interviewing them for a blog she started about women's stories. One of her posts, titled "Why My Grandmother Taught Me Never to Judge a Book by Its Cover," went viral and brought even more attention to our foundation. As I sat in the library that day, watching these remarkable women accept their scholarships, I thought about Charles and how proud he would have been. He always said that the best revenge was living well and doing good. I had done both. After the ceremony, a young reporter from the Boston Globe approached me. Mrs. Hartwell, there are rumors that your family members tried to take advantage of you financially. How did that situation resolve? I smiled and adjusted the vintage Hermes scarf around my shoulders, one of the pieces Delphine had tried to steal and sell. Sometimes people make mistakes, I said diplomatically. The important thing is that they learn from them and find ways to make amends. We're all works in progress, aren't we? And your advice for other older adults who might be facing similar situations. I thought for a moment, never let anyone make you feel invisible or worthless because of your age or appearance. And remember that wisdom is the one thing that actually improves with age. Use it. 6 months after this all began, I can tell you that my relationship with my family has actually grown stronger. Candace and Delphine learned that treating people with respect and kindness opens more doors than manipulation ever could. And I learned that standing up for yourself, no matter your age, is always worth it. If you've ever faced judgment or mistreatment because of how you look or how old you are, I want you to know that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. You have more power than you think. You just have to be willing to use it wisely. Have you experienced something similar with family members or friends underestimating you? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and we feature real stories from our community right here on the channel. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.